and how's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest gaming news, rumors, and speculation. Today we're going deep into that speculation country, my friends. Way deeper than Starfield and even the Elder Scrolls 6, because instead today we're focusing on that mythical creature known as Fallout 5, or more specifically, where Fallout 5 will most likely take place. In a previous video I broke down where I believe that location most likely is, however today I want to do something a little bit different. Instead I want to break down all of the potential settings for Fallout 5. Every credible location the game has a solid chance of being set in, and all this is based on potential hints straight from Bethesda, as well as the latest and the greatest community theories. We have a handful of potential locations to go through today, so I'll make sure to be as quick and precise as possible, so that way the video doesn't end up turning into like an hour-long skooma-induced speculation trance rant or something. So let's not waste any more time and get straight into today's content. First off, I want to begin today's video by saying again, Fallout 5 does indeed exist. Kind of. Currently it's a one-page outline, likely guarded within the Bethesda Game Studios vaults as if it were a literal real-life Elder Scrolls. There's probably an entire army of Todd Howard clones standing ready to defend this one-page document. Todd Howard, after all, did confirm this is actually the case in recent videos. For the one-page Fallout 5 document, not confirming that there's an army of Todd Howard clones. But either way, that still doesn't say much about the game, but at the same time, it does. It's skooma. This one-page outline just means Bethesda does indeed have an idea as to what kind of game they want Fallout 5 to be, what the tone of the game world would be, what new game mechanics they may want to experiment with, what the potential main story arc could be, and of course, where the game's setting will most likely be as well. After all, if you were to have any foundation or one-page outline for a Fallout game, one of the first things on the list would most certainly be the game's setting, as that'll play a huge part in like nearly every other aspect of Fallout 5's world building. So it's very likely that at this exact point in time, Bethesda Game Studios knows very well exactly where the setting of Fallout 5 will be, and that location is written down on a piece of paper, and in my opinion it'll most likely be one of the following locations. Some of this I did mention in the previous video, but if I did, I'll make sure to expand on it a little bit more today. The first potential Fallout 5 location is San Francisco. Now, San Francisco is a city that has long had a presence within the Fallout lore and universe, going as far back as Fallout 2. The city itself is an actual surviving, functioning city, home to factions unique to that city as well, such as the Shi, who are descendants of Chinese submarine crewmen that were beached near the city after the Great War. Then there are the Hubologists, a cult that believe they can create a spaceship and eventually leave Earth, and seem to have like some kind of similarities with Scientology or something. It's hard to actually explain these people without going into a crazy rabbit hole, but they're an interesting group, and there are many in the community that actually don't think San Francisco would be the setting of Fallout 5 because it was already in Fallout 2, like I just said. But while I normally would agree with this, there is actual evidence straight from Bethesda Game Studios that kinda says the opposite here. Within a no-clip Bethesda documentary, Emil Pagliaro, a Bethesda developer, stated that Fallout 4 was actually originally planned to take place in San Francisco, and potentially even New York. And on top of this, Bethesda tends to hint towards future settings in their previous games. I'll show you some evidence of this here in a minute, but Bethesda has done this for San Francisco specifically in Fallout 4, just as numerous NPCs within the world of Fallout 3 claimed to have originated from the Commonwealth area. Kellogg within Fallout 4 claims he is actually from San Francisco. The Golden Gate Bridge is even shown within Kellogg's memories in the background, and while this could just be Bethesda paying homage to one of the main nostalgic settings of earlier Fallout games, the San Francisco hints don't stop there. There is a cut line of dialogue that Obsidian included within New Vegas, stating that San Francisco was wiped out by the Enclave sometime after Fallout 2, and one important thing to note here is that Bethesda Game Studios was fairly hands-off during New Vegas' development, allowing Obsidian to basically do whatever they wanted for the most part. However, Bethesda Game Studios explicitly stepped in and asked for this line of dialogue involving San Francisco being destroyed to be removed from the game, so that way San Francisco could remain an option for a setting of a future Fallout game, which is very, very interesting. Further down that speculation wormhole, the Atomic Command Pip-Boy game featured San Francisco, and a Hubologist within the Fallout 4 Nuka World DLC are also literally from San Francisco. So while this may seem like I just hit that skooma a little bit too much and I'm speculating here, there is 100% a pattern here, and Fallout 4 literally has been hinting towards San Francisco in the same exact way that Fallout 3 hinted towards the Commonwealth, with several NPCs within the game bringing up the location in conversation, being from the literal location, and at the same time, one of the game's DLCs mentioning the location somehow as well. In legit every single way, Fallout 3 hinted towards Boston as being the setting of Fallout 4 before we even knew that was the case. Fallout 4 is hinting towards San Francisco. And here's the evidence supporting that. Within Fallout 3, Boston and the surrounding area known as the Commonwealth are all name-dropped by various NPCs within the game world. Ishmael Asher, ruler of the pit, mentions the Commonwealth, stating that the Commonwealth should envy what they accomplished in the pit, and on top of this, Harkness, Dr. Zimmer, and Armitage all mention how they are from the Commonwealth as well, so that alone makes the Commonwealth the most mentioned region within Fallout 3, other than the capital wasteland itself, which is the region it was. However, this isn't where the evidence stops, it keeps getting deeper than this. During the events of Broken Steel, Dr. Lee leaves the capital wasteland on a trip to the Commonwealth, and then later joins the Institute, which not only foreshadows the setting of Fallout 4 again, but at the same time even hints towards one of the most important factions within Fallout 4 as well. Also, Tobar, captain of the Duchess Gambit, also mentions having made several trips to the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is yet again mentioned within a few terminals within the Point Lookout DLC as well, so clearly there is an abundance of important NPCs having made the trip to the capital wasteland from the Commonwealth, and on top of that, with the Commonwealth specifically being mentioned numerous times, it kinda makes it obvious that Bethesda was most likely hinting towards one of the potential settings of Fallout 4, and what actually ended up being the actual setting of Fallout 4 as well. This is the evidence I was talking about. Bethesda definitely hinted towards one of the potential settings of Fallout 4, which was the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth ended up actually being the real setting of Fallout 4, and that was the most referenced region within Fallout 3. So this is way more than coincidence in my opinion. And in the same exact way, San Francisco seems to be hinted at within Fallout 4. So that is why I believe, based on this pattern alone, that San Francisco seems to have the highest probability of being within Fallout 5. But let's check out some of the other potential locations, because like I said, Emil Paluro didn't just say Fallout 4 was almost set in San Francisco. For the most part, he said it was almost set in New York. New York would be a stark contrast to Boston and the Commonwealth, as New York would no doubt be a big, dense urban environment. However, based on Fallout lore, New York City would be a pretty hardcore place to try to explore and survive in. Brotherhood of Steel members who believed they flew over the city describe it as being nothing but rows of giant ruined towers infested with nothing but mutants and savages amongst the rooftops. Others believe New York was basically completely wiped off the map, being destroyed completely back when the bombs originally dropped during the Great War. However, Washington, D.C. was said to be wiped off the map completely. However, we still had plenty of areas to explore, and there is still plenty of life to interact with. Either way, Bethesda has already proven they're interested in New York as a potential Fallout setting, so I'd say it's on the list for Fallout 5. Both New York and San Francisco seem to be the most likely candidates, but there are a few more interesting theories out there that I want to break down real quick. The first is Toronto, Canada. If New York was almost the setting for Fallout 4, then Bethesda is clearly interested in a dense urban environment, and Toronto would check that box quite well. Also, having a Fallout game set in Canada would allow for the first single-player Fallout game to entirely be set outside of the United States. One of the main factors against a Fallout game being set outside of the country is that Vault-Tec tends to always have some kind of major presence within the game. Even if they exist in just the form of the various vaults you can discover and explore within the game world, Vault-Tec is always around somehow. And Vault-Tec is inherently an American company, meaning a Fallout game set outside of the United States would be lacking one of its most prominent features, the vaults themselves and Vault-Tec. However, Canada is the exception here. It is outside of the United States as we know and accept it. However, within Fallout lore, it's stated that Canada was annexed to the United States and is basically a vassal state of sorts, or just another state altogether, meaning Vault-Tec would most likely have free reign to establish itself and operate within Canada, making a Fallout game set in Canada much more likely. However, Fallout tends to stick to American settings though, as the pre-war American Fallout universe is always the primary backdrop and setting we see while playing a Fallout game. It is always there to remind us of what used to be and what all was lost. Toronto was mentioned within that Fallout 3 Pit DLC though, so who knows, you can take it as evidence or not. Either way, Toronto is interesting enough that I felt like breaking it down in today's video, but now for some less likely settings, but still potential locations based on the setting being mentioned within previous games, as well as potential community theories. The locations here aren't listed in any particular order of credibility or evidence level though. First off, Phoenix, Arizona. Some people believe previous leaked Fallout concept art featured key locations in Arizona, as well as Phoenix was mentioned within Fallout New Vegas in like one line of dialogue, but just because a city is mentioned once in a game isn't enough to consider it a potential setting for Fallout 5, so let's move on. Next up is New Orleans, another major city location with interesting heritage and culture, and actually is my preferred setting. I would love to see a Fallout game in New Orleans for so many reasons. Maybe I'll break that down in a future video, but the surrounding countryside and towns could also be included within the game world as well, such as Lafayette, kinda like how Fallout 4 had Concord and so on. And also the swamps would make for a very interesting setting as well, and Bethesda already experimented with a Fallout swamp setting within the Point Lookout DLC, and it just worked in my opinion. Despite how interesting a New Orleans Fallout 5 setting would be though, and despite how much it would just work, there is no actual evidence suggesting Fallout 5 would take place there, except for this actual evidence. In 2016, there was a major trademark filed for Fallout New Orleans. However, nothing was seen from this project yet, and it could be the name of the Fallout Amazon TV series. But either way, there is a little bit of evidence here suggesting a Fallout New Orleans game. Next up is Chicago, another one of the huge community theories. Chicago is a dense urban environment like New York. However, unlike New York, Chicago isn't really mentioned within the previous games nearly as much. Within New Vegas, though, it is mentioned in a line of dialogue, again, just one line of dialogue, that the major Enclave outpost is set up near Chicago, but that's basically it. Some believe the game could be set in Hawaii, and we haven't really ever had a tropical Fallout setting yet. Many speculate that Hawaii might not have been as affected by the bombs or even the Great War itself, meaning Hawaii could be the most unique Fallout setting yet. However, many doubt that the game set in a location without the radioactive fallout or effects from the bombs or the Great War would greatly take away from the very thing that makes a Fallout game an actual Fallout game, as there would be like basically no mutants or destruction. Still though, Hawaii seemed interesting enough that I felt like I'd mention it real quick in today's video. Also, there is, for some reason, a community theory believing the game will take place in Seattle, but this theory likely has the least amount of evidence supporting it. Literally none, but it still exists and is one of the more popular Fallout 5 setting theories, so I figured I'd also mention it real quick before closing today's video out. That is basically everything though. That's all the prevailing community theories based on actual evidence straight from Bethesda, or based on absolutely nothing but a dream, depending on the theory. I'd say that somewhere within this very list though is the actual setting for Fallout 5 itself, unless Bethesda decides to just completely surprise us. Remember though, this setting is likely already known by a select few within Bethesda Game Studios and is written down on that one page of magical paper. So how close are we, Todd? Let us know down in the comments below if we guessed correctly. That's everything I wanted to talk about today though. As always, let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. Thumbs up if you enjoy the content. Be sure to subscribe to help grow the community and the channel, and huge shout out and much love and appreciation to the following amazing people for going above and beyond to support the channel and the community. Get your name added to this permanent future video shoutout list that I'll feature at the end of every single one of my future videos. All you gotta do is support the channel on Ko-fi, Patreon, or here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. I am updating this list at the end of every month, and the end of the month is a couple days away, so now's your chance to get added to this list. Links for all this and more are down in the description below, as well as a link for Skullzi merchandise and the Skullzi Discord server. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when hopefully Fallout 5 comes out before a real-life apocalyptic event.
It just works.